Spike doesn't play with girls.
Spike touches penis. Spike has fun.
And on that note, let's hit the trailer.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Chat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash Aunt Tootie Goodsen.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatthemovies.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. Find all that information and past episodes at shatontv.com. Finally, to hang out with us live all week long, please follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatthemovies.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and just had our hot sauce challenge with Hot Sauce Steve. You can check all that out at shatthemovies.com/Twitch. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
So, Gene, this week's commissioner, David Kay, is like a few that we've had in the last couple of weeks that are return commissioners. So that's very nice. I guess people are finding that the entertainment value we provide, hours per dollar, it's a good deal.
It's called social proof at the biz, Big D.
We appreciate the return patrons who come back again for more movies. So in the future, David has commissioned Arthur, and previously he had done The Color of Money.
Ooh.
So maybe there's a connection between the movie tonight. But for David tonight, our parents are out of town. They're visiting Aunt Tootie.
Mm-hmm.
We're all alone. We're getting extra horny.
Mm-hmm.
And Ash and Gene and I are all willing to pay for sex. And that's why we have to be commissioning
I am not.
the 1983 teen sex comedy, Risky Business.
And David wrote in and said, dudes, is it possible that Risky Business has never been reviewed and is not on the schedule? If so, I felt I needed to commission this movie before you are charged with criminal negligence. I was 15 when I saw Risky Business in the theater, and can tell you it immediately became the quintessential guys movie. It captures all of the angst, motivations, and insecurities of every kid that age. The score by Tangerine Dream and the cinematography were both groundbreaking for the time. The acting by everyone was superb, the story was great, and it was just plain entertaining. Thanks again for the great podcast. I look forward to it every week. Keep up the great work. Look out for a Venmo from me. Best regards, David Kay.
So now David also wrote, because I talk about Mamaroneck and growing up in Westchester. He actually grew up in Edgemont. So we would play their school. We were both smaller high schools. He went to Sal's and got some great Sicilian pizza. It's still there. He went to Walter's where they had the hot dog eating contest. This was all before David went kosher, but we grew up in the same area. So it was nice to have a listener and have that connection.
Big D, you know what could have tipped the scales in that school rivalry? Especially in football games, is if you didn't have the spirit of a pussy.
Oh, that really would have. That would have helped. Yeah. I didn't know where you were going with that. I was completely honest.
I really didn't.
I thought you were going to talk about like one of the O'Neill brothers. But
this is the problem, is when I get drunk, I think everyone's psychic around me. Like, you know what I'm talking about. But David, thank you so much for commissioning this. And I recently got asked if anyone had commissioned Natural Born Killers. And I thought for sure someone has, right? But in order to have gaps in a fence, first you got to build the fence. So now we got the fence built, and it's everyone's job to go, well, what the fuck were they missing? Things like Natural Born Killers, massive gap in the library needs to be commissioned. I was going to say Flash Gordon, but we got that commissioned earlier today, so that's taken care of. Thank you so much for doing that. So we're slowly going in, and now we're kind of cementing the holes. We're patching over the gaps we have in our repertoire, and we'll do better for you, David. So thank you so much for commissioning this movie. Risky Business is a 1983 teen sex comedy written and directed by Paul Brickman in his directorial debut and starring Tom Cruise and Rebecca De Mornay. The film covers themes including materialism, loss of innocence, coming of age, and capitalism. Best known as Cruise's breakout film, Risky Business was a critical and commercial success, grossing more than $63 million against a $6.2 million budget. So Ash, Big D, we always ask what your memories are of the movie we're covering. Tonight is Risky Business. Ash, what are your memories?
I'm not really sure the first time I saw this movie, but I think it was probably at some point in high school. There was a time period following the first of the Mission Impossible films that he starting in 1996, where we all kind of got on board with like revisiting Tom Cruise's movies, everything from like Interview with a Vampire to this one, Risky Business. I remember All the Right Stuff. We used to watch that and try to pause it to see his dick, because if you pause it just right, you can see Tom Cruise's dick, and that was a thing.
Wow.
But I do remember the iconic parts of this movie. I remember the what the fuck. I remember the underwear scene. But I didn't really remember the plot. And I'll be very honest, when I started watching it, I was like, he opens a brothel? Like, I had no clue that that's what this movie was about. I remembered nothing about it at all.
Wait, The Right Stuff, like the movie about how they broke the sound barrier with Chuck Yeager?
No,
he's a high school football player, I think, in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and if you pause it,
it's
just
called
right,
All the Right Moves, not
All the Right
Stuff.
Moves.
All
That's
the right
what it
moves.
is.
That's
See,
right.
that's the problem, is he didn't have the right stuff, because it was very tiny.
Yeah, you two would hate that movie. There's some manufacturing work in there that's very hazardous, but you guys would poo-poo it.
Does someone randomly die from an explosion after giving someone a vintage Letterman jacket? No.
Listen, anyone who's been in Air Force Junior ROTC knows that you have to watch The Right Stuff about 4 times a year as part of the required curriculum from your aerospace science instructor. So I apologize.
Oh, good.
All the right moves.
Yeah, I was wrong.
The right stuff. Okay. Yeah, Ash, aside from Tom Cruise sliding around in his undies scene, which was like on MTV all the time, I think, with the Bob Seger song, I haven't seen this movie. I thought I had. Like, I could have sworn I had, like a lot of the 80s movies that we do, but it's probably just because everyone and their mother was talking about it when I was a kid. So I think after a certain point, when you pick up enough data points, you feel like you've seen the movie. But as we watched this again, it was like, there's a brothel?
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca De Mornay is in this? And I didn't remember anything other than Tom Cruise underwear.
I very much remembered this movie, but talking about all the Tom Cruise movies, you realize that there were phases of Tom Cruise. There's the young, innocent, Risky Business, Legend, Outsiders, that Tom Cruise. Then he becomes kind of more the glossy Top Gun Maverick. Then he goes into the fucking crazy phase. Then he went and did Tropic Thunder, became cool again. And then he has kind of come back now where he's kind of cool. It's okay to like him again. But at this time, I was only 9 when this came out. So I had not started to explore my body yet, to touch myself. So Risky Business really did not hold my interest at all. But sometime over the next few years, I don't know when it was, both of those things changed. I started to realize the fun that I could have, how I could make my legs tingle. I just found out the benefits of exploring your body. And I also found out the benefits of Rebecca De Mornay's body and how it made me feel. I probably watched this movie once I hit puberty 10 times, 15 times, and I wasted a hell of a lot of Kleenex, but
wow.
It was a great memory to go back and watch it now and be able to stay lotion free.
And on that note, let's hit the trailer.
So your folks are going out of town.
Just use your best judgment. We trust you.
Got the place all to yourself?
A good time, Joel. In the privacy of your own home.
Just take those old records off the shelf.
That's her. She's fantastic. Yeah.
I sit and listen to them by myself.
Did you have a good time last night?
I had a great time.
Today's music ain't
You ever get high, Joe?
Don't let me do anything stupid. Don't worry.
Who's the U-boat commander?
Don't try to take me to a disco.
I don't remember giving permission for a party, Joe.
A party?
I still like that old time rock and roll.
I've got a trig midterm tomorrow, and I'm being chased by Guido, the killer pimp.
Kind of music just soothes the soul.
Doesn't anyone want to accomplish anything, or do we just want to make money?
Make money. Make a lot of money.
That old time rock and roll.
There's a time for playing it safe
Rock and roll.
and a time for risky business.
Ace high school student Joel Goodsen lives with his wealthy parents in the Chicago North Shore. His father wants him to attend Princeton University, so Joel participates in Future Enterprisers, an extracurricular activity in which students work in teams to create small businesses. When his parents go away on a trip, Joel's friend Miles convinces him to use his newfound freedom to have some fun. On the first night, he raids the liquor cabinet, plays the stereo loudly, joyrides in his father's car, and dances around in the living room in his briefs and button-down shirt to old-time rock and roll. So, in a case of things that should have been left on the cutting room floor, this movie opens up with a dream sequence that made no sense and almost made me opt out of the movie. There's one good thing about this opening scene is we get a very early surprise boob, which has kind of become the theme of 2021 for Shat the Movies.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, this entire opening sequence of about 5 minutes, I think it hurts the movie. Like, you can tell that Risky Business was released at a time when people went to the theater and weren't about to walk out after spending their hard-earned Reagan-era dough, right? Like, they were like, look, I already paid. I'm already here. But you try that shit today with all the streaming options you have, with the fact that you could just click off and go watch something else, this movie would have been dead in the water in the first 5 minutes. And I wasn't feeling very good to begin with.
No, and it's pretty ballsy because it's not just the dramatic music. It's not just the doors opening slowly. It's like the smoky air. And then all of a sudden it goes on. Then he's in a classroom, and it reminded me of that scene from Nightmare on Elm Street where she's, seeing the dead body like be dragged down the hallway in the body bag. It was just really strange. And like Eugene, I got so nervous. I was like, oh, this is going to be this movie. And thankfully it gets a whole lot better, but what a fucking shitty opening.
Yeah, like, did you find yourself wishing it was Ferris Bueller's? Like, I've never been a big fan of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I was like, please, I would rather watch that than whatever is happening here.
No, but Gene, what fucking world do you live in where someone in a streaming service is going to click off this movie because there's a girl taking a shower? What world do you live in? That doesn't happen. This shower scene is less about sex, okay? It's not about... He doesn't even get to wash her back. She asks him, he doesn't even get in there. It's more about that overbearing 80s pressure that he feels. He's got to get into the best college. He's got to make the most money. He's got to become a success. He's got to then marry that type of girl and buy a house on the street. And everyone in Joel's life is driving this message home. So they want to establish right away that he can't even have a wet dream successfully. He can't even get off without having it turn into a nightmare where he's going to fuck his future by missing the college boards.
I get what you're saying, but maybe just include that stress as like a conversation while they're playing poker, right? Like, he could describe the dream. He is an actor. We don't need to actually see it. I've criticized Savage Steve Holland for like doing those animation scenes in Better Off Dead and One Crazy Summer. I'd rather have that than whatever the fuck they were trying to pull off here.
And I really appreciate, Big T, that you call this the 1980s pressure to get into the best college. Like, that's not still a thing. I would argue that a 2021 pressure to get into college is significantly worse. I just went to a training today that was talking about how, like, Texas schools, the higher ed, they're going to start capping at 4 and 5% of the top graduates in order to get in. So, like, and this time, Joel, it might have been reasonable for him to get in Princeton if you had enough money and you went to the right school. Today, It's a fucking bloodbath to get into these schools.
Yes, I'm saying the percentages of the top schools, but you don't need to go to one of these schools in order to be successful. You just got to look at Silicon Valley. Look at the billionaires. Look at out there the people who are dropping out of college and who are going out and starting companies using technologies. There's other options. Yes, is it likely? I see you raising your hand very nicely, but there are other options. In the 80s, there was no other option. There was no Steve Jobs, no Mark Zuckerberg.
It's just because you're not in education. Like, trust me, like, I get that may be like what the general feeling is like, oh, maybe you don't have to go to college. But like, the push is still go to fucking college because that's how schools are evaluated. So that pressure is still there. I mean, and maybe they don't need to be successful, but it's still pretty hard to get a job without a degree like that.
I see poor people, minorities making it all the time. 2021 is a time of opportunity for all.
Well, something I can certainly say that I do not relate to in this film at all is this idea of parents leaving you alone while they go off on vacation with Aunt Tootie. My parents did not believe in vacationing without the kids. Part of this because they don't particularly get along very well, but they never left us alone. That was never even an option. If they were going to go somewhere, we were going to go somewhere. And so because of that, we could never really throw parties at our house. We certainly couldn't start a brothel. And I had friends that did this, but like, as far as like those milestones of, oh, okay, well now I'm old enough for my parents to go out of town without me, never happened for me. What about you two?
My mom, she would go on vacation without me and that was fine. But there was one time, and I apologize if I've told this story on the pod before. We've been doing this for like 5 years. I don't remember what fucking stories I've told anymore. But one time my mom did go out of town and I was in a band, Dante and the Infernos, you might have heard of it. We decided to do a show with two other bands. One of them was Number 2, and I think the other one was called The Twits.
Fucking killer lineup.
And we decided that we wanted to have a show at my mom's house. But like being a good kid, being like Joel, I had a plan. And so the plan was that I was going to remove everything that was valuable out of the main house, but mark on a map. I would map out the house where everything was, right? That crystal egg, any artwork, any furniture. And I moved it all into the master bedroom, my mom's room, locked that door. And then we put 2 layers of cardboard on all of the floor. So if anybody spilled or if anybody like had any sort of an accident, it wouldn't get onto the carpet because this is the 90s when we had carpet for some reason. We had the show. I would have gotten away with it, except unlike Joel, I didn't pay attention to when my mom was coming home. She said she was coming home at 10 and to pick her up from the airport. She meant 10 a.m. I assumed p.m. And so I woke up to my mom in the house with all of her furniture in her room and just like garbage bags full of empty bottles in the kitchen. So it didn't really go well for me.
So she didn't make it to watch Number 2 perform?
No, she didn't see Number 2 perform. Although I think she still has the cassette tape. They made an excellent cassette. Including their hit song, Why Are You Leaving? I'm Still Horny.
Oh, I can't believe I missed that. Just count myself lucky. But no, I never had a party at my house. I never had a desire to. My sister was 5 years older than me. And I've said before that every weekend we would drive upstate. We were like fixing up this house we had in the cabin, this shack that now is a house. But my grandmother would never let us home alone because we would fight constantly. But I would never have a party. Never. Why? After you go to one party and you see that kids in general do not give a shit about other people's stuff, I've never really seen a house respected as much as Joel's is later on. I would have known definitely people are going to trash the house. There is no way I would have ever dreamed of having a party in my house.
Well, the following day, Miles calls a sex worker named Jackie on Joel's behalf. When Jackie turns out to be transgender, Joel pays her just to leave. But before she does, she gives Joel the number for another escort named Lana. That night, Joel hesitantly calls Lana, who is revealed as a gorgeous blonde woman, and they stay sexually engaged all night. Lana asks Joel for $300 for her services. When he returns from the bank, she is gone, along with his mother's expensive Steuben glass egg. Joel finds Lana and demands the egg back, but Lana's pimp, Guido, interrupts them, pulling a gun. Joel is chased by Guido and escapes in his dad's Porsche. and Lana tells Joel that the egg is with the rest of her belongings at Guido's place.
One of the biggest complaints that I have often about 80s films that feature teens, or even 90s films that feature teens as their leads, is how unrealistic the teenagers act. That they clearly don't look like teenagers, they don't sound like them, and they don't act like them. And I have to say that Risky Business really flips that on its head. It is the rare example where the teenagers actually act like teenagers. And Joel here, he is so naive. He is naive AF, and he does not understand what's happening to him, or more specifically, why the decisions he's making are causing these things to happen to him. And just the fact that everything he does makes it worse. So when he leaves Lana in the house again and he just goes to school, right? When he doesn't understand that he's going to go cash the savings bond in and she's clearly going to rip him off. Those are all things that a teenager would do. A teenager like Joel, that's a good kid, not a super worldly kid, just a suburban kid who doesn't know much about the way that the world works. And while some of these actors still look 40, they at least act their age in the script.
Ash, I'm so glad you brought this up because it is spot on. As we're watching this movie after that opening dream sequence, we get this poker scene where these teenagers are sitting around a table in a basement. They're smoking cigars. I think in various points of the movie, they're like popping beers like it's no big deal. And I was so worried during that poker scene that the kids were all going to act like grown men. And then I realized that in this scene, they're actually posturing like grown men, and they are truly written as teenagers. And that was a brilliant move. I'm so glad the movie quickly got its bearings. And then from this point on, I think it just kicks ass. But speaking of that manliness, I mean, Joel can fuck.
I think so.
I've never paid a worker for sex, but plenty of my friends have. I won't name names. And from what I've heard, at least here in Arizona, $100 for a quickie is considered like a screaming deal. Like if someone will come over and fuck you for $100, that's great. Joel pays $300 and he gets like doors flying open, fall breeze, like moonlight model sex with Rebecca De Mornay. And they fuck in like 4 different rooms. Like we're in the kitchen, and then we're on the stairs, and then we're on a lazy boy, and fucking the next day she's around for breakfast. I'm like, for $300, this is the greatest bargain in escort history.
Yeah, but then we return to the unrealistic nature of movies and teens, because when she comes in, she's so hot, right? Like she's so sexy in that purple dress, and like he runs his hand up her leg and realizes she doesn't have underwear on. Like he would have come right there. Like no 17-year-old that's never had sex before he's going to feel the breeze and get a hard on and like lose it. And nobody that has sex for the first time, he'd be thrusting all weird and like shaking his body in some weird way. And like it would not have been a good time for her.
As a former 17-year-old, I can tell you, yes, we come quickly, but our refractory period is like 5 seconds. So
sure.
I don't think he did it all in one go. I think each of those was a different fuck. Like they fuck like 8 times in one night.
Right. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that like he sustained it, but like he would have looked at her and it would have been like in his pants.
No.
So.
Did you see Joel? He was doing flies on his bed with dumbbells. He's in shape. He's fit. Joel shows us he's got skills. If anyone could do it, he could.
Yeah, this is how we know it's an 80s movie, because if this was made in like 2020 or 2021, the joke would have been Joel nutting like over and over and over again. And they would have made like a music montage out of that, probably to some 80s throwback music. Right. What I got.
You're the best around.
Jesus. But this whole movie is basically one big life lesson for Joel. He's naive. He's being taken to school by a bunch of older people who are teaching him the way life really works. You have to negotiate the price before you have anyone work for you. Whether you get a plumber, a gardener, a sex worker, anyone, negotiate the price ahead of time. Yeah, it's stupid. You can't. In 98, I went to Amsterdam with 3 college friends for the Thanksgiving break. They all had money. I was broke as a joke. I had absolutely no money. So they were there. They had plenty of money. We went to the red light district, and it is an open market if you've never been there. There's a distinct region that has all shops that workers can rent by the hour, by the day. They have a large display window where you put the products, and the customers walk along the streets. It's very secure. There's closed circuit TV. There's police everywhere. And you go up and you knock on the door and you ask the price. Now, the price is on a floating scale. So they will look at you as the customer and say, I think it was guilders back then, but I think the rate was you could do a combo pack. It was called a fucking suck, and I think it was 200 guild. It was a combo deal. But if Gene, they might say, 150. You never know. Or they could actually could actually turn the client down. And that was sad. I saw people being turned down, right? But I didn't get my friends. My friends kept going for the combo, the fuck suck combo for 200. And I said, why? I said, the fuck or the suck alone is 100. You're getting half the climaxes for twice the money.
Buddy, they were having boner problems. That's why you go for the fuck suck, because you get the suck to get your boner to do the fuck. That's a guy who's just not ready to go. That is not a 17-year-old.
Yeah, but the thing that blew my mind was the amount of couples. You would see couples going in and getting a third party. You would see parents and children. It was a wild time. My issue here going forward is Joel, we're meeting his friends. And yes, you guys like the fact that they're acting their age and, they're not acting older, but they're a group of spoiled rich kids. They are fucking difficult to watch. They condescend to each other. There's no good-natured fun in anything that they do. They're conceited. They're all about what they have or what they're going to get. They talk shit about somebody. Oh, they got into Harvard. Oh, fuck. Well, did you hear he got a 1,500 on his SATs? Oh, they're hating on everyone. Glenn's got the balls to show up to Joel's house and try to bang in his parents' bedroom. He didn't change the sheets when he left. And then he's moaning and disrupting this study group, so he's got to leave. Miles gives this whole fucking BS speech about what the fuck. Sometimes, Joel, you just got to say it. Gives you freedom, brings you opportunity. Only a rich kid who's never had a challenge in his life will spew this kind of fucking babble about how to live your life and what it means. Only these rich, annoying friends.
Big D, how dare you talk shit about Booger? Like, I loved everything coming out of this guy's mouth. He's chasing Joel around the yard like Countess Angelique seeks young submissive with large ankles. Like, he's fun. He makes the call and then eats the phone number. Like, I was really enjoying this character. He's pushing Joel into a world of actually living. I love him.
No, but he's a poser. He's exposed at the end. When he takes out his pipe, I don't pay for it. He is exposed as a fraud.
But again, he's like a regular kid, right? He's spouting off all this philosophical bullshit, all this philosophical mumbo jumbo. I had friends like that in high school. I had friends who were completely full of shit and believed that they were like hot shit and like your typical, I don't know, have you guys ever seen that movie Adventure Time? The guy that plays Guilfoyle Martin Starr is in it, and he smokes his pipe and he's like all high and mighty, but like none of the girls actually want to fuck with him. Like, that's what you've got here in his character. And I don't know, I like that because I knew these people. They eventually grew up and were Dante and Clerks, and I knew them then too. Right?
That's what he would have been. That's why I hate him.
Right. That's why I love them. They're my people.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a testament to the quality of Risky Business and how likable these characters are, because for once I'm seeing a movie with rich people I don't hate. So kudos to you, Risky Business. Well, Joel lets Lana stay at his house while he goes to school. When he returns, his friends have come over, and Lana has invited another escort, Vicky, to stay, but Joel rejects the idea. The women encounter Guido on the front lawn before running back into Joel's house. Later that night, Joel, Lana, Vicky, and Joel's friend Barry go out and get high. Lana accidentally bumps the Porsche out of gear while retrieving her purse, and the car rolls down the hill and onto a pier. The pier collapses and the Porsche sinks into Lake Michigan. So Risky Business presents two really dangerous things that I have learned to avoid from past experience. The first one is people who are sexy, but not beautiful. Like, we all know these people, men and women. They're not quite beautiful. They're not virtuous. They're not lovely, but they're fucking sexy. Like, you want to fuck them despite everything else. And that is dangerous, because you already know your evaluation of them is warped, and that means they can get away with a lot. But the other dangerous thing is people who won't leave your house or apartment or dorm room. Like, watch out for these fuckers, because you can't just throw them out. Like, say you fuck somebody and you want to keep fucking them, but you also got shit to do. They have no respect for that, right? They don't care about your job or the fact you have to go to class or any of that. They are just totally content to just hang around your place. And like, what the fuck do? You can't call the cops. You can't kick their asses. You're just left at a loss. And Joel has to deal with this. And I'm telling you, if you're a young listener out there, of which we have very few, don't get wrapped up with these two people. Sexy but not beautiful, and people who won't leave your house.
I wish that I had had this advice at some point before I went to college, because especially the sexy thing, right? It makes you ignore every fucking red flag that they have about them. You ignore every single one, and they are always the craziest motherfuckers that you deal with. And usually the ones that also won't leave, right? They're the ones that just all of a sudden park their car at your house and it's there 3 days later because they haven't left yet. But I have to say that one of the big surprises for me in this movie was another Joey Pants performance. He was absolutely fantastic in this. The dude steals every scene that he's in. And I don't know if you guys are big Sopranos fans, but I could see so much of like a young Ralphie, like a little preview of what that character would be on The Sopranos here. And while Ralphie is an absolute joke, his character here, Guido, is also just absolutely ridiculous, but yet still strangely threatening. And I think that's a testament to his performance, because every line is delivered perfectly. And he's one of my favorite parts about this movie, because he's a classic kind of pimp character, but it's not offensive. It's actually really pretty incredible.
We've been doing this for a while, and when we see certain formulas in a movie synopsis, I sort of brace myself for what I'm about to see. So when I know a movie from 1983 is going to feature a pimp and a transgendered sex worker, I'm like, how badly are we going to botch this? How offensive is it going to be? But I was surprised with Risky Business. Jackie, the transgendered sex worker, is done with respect. Like, she is actually in control of the entire situation. She shows up, Joel won't open the door, and she tells Joel, be a courageous person, right?
Open the door.
And then he gives Joel Lana's number, and he says, she's what every white boy off the lake wants, right? She's recognizing that he's the silly one in this scenario. He's the basic one. Guido, the pimp, Joey Pants, he's not super scary, but he's not all laughs. They didn't make him a joke, but they also didn't make him like a terrifying, super abusive dude. I think they played it pretty well. And Ash, you're absolutely right. He is just so fun to watch.
You see, I think they did it right. Like we talked about with like serial killers, like in Silence of the Lambs. If you're in control and you're calm, that's much scarier than like a Jason Voorhees that's just wild and all action. He's not physically intimidating, but when he says, and he puts his arm on, Joel's shoulder, he says, Joel, in a sluggish economy, you never want to fuck with a man's livelihood. So he's telling Joel, she means more to me than she does to you. And Joel is right to not trust Lana. You don't leave her alone in the house. And then even after the egg theft, maybe she's had a change of heart. Maybe she's the good-hearted, pretty woman type sex worker, who's looking for love. No, this isn't Julia Roberts. Joel's at school, and Lana is searching the house. She is top to bottom. She's looking for anything of value. She's flipping over the rug. She's reading the tags. She's seeing what brand the silverware are. She's looking for the key. She's driving the Porsche. She is a predator. She does not care about Joel. She doesn't respect him or the fact that he's naive and his good nature. Okay? She sees him as a payday. Now, whether it's she's overstaying her, like you said, you can't get her out of the house, and she's overstaying herself, she invites a coworker to come over and use the house for sex. And then she puts Joel at risk with Guido, who's pulled a gun. I thought she was going to have a good heart and this was going to be a redemption story, but all along she is manipulating Joel for her own selfish reasons.
If you limit the role of a sex worker, if you say that a sex worker is doing their job by putting P in V and anything beyond that is out of bounds, then I agree with you. But that's not what sex workers do. It's not just about P in V. she's giving Joel exactly what he wants. Like, we didn't see the other movie this could have been, Big D's movie of the respectable sex worker, which would have been, which wouldn't have been Risky Business. It would have been Out of Business, where Joel just gets laid and then he goes back to his normal lame life. No. Joel liked the car chase. He liked seeing the gun. He liked that Guido freakout on his front lawn. He's obsessed with Lana because she makes him feel something, because it's exciting. Think about what the movie shows us when he's not with her. What is his life? He's a bored kid dragging bags of leaves down a driveway.
Wow, okay. I think you're right.
Yeah, man, she's earning her pay.
Yeah, she's still a bad person, though.
Well, Joel and Lana decide to turn his parents' house into a brothel, for a night to pay for car repairs. A recruiter from Princeton chooses that very night to interview Joel. The interview is plagued by interruptions, and the recruiter is unimpressed by Joel's resume, but he sticks around for the party. Joel and Lana leave the party and make love on the Chicago L. The next morning, Joel finds his house has been burgled.
I have to say, I think Joel and Lana are pretty genius here. I'm surprised that these types of parties don't happen in real life more often, or perhaps they do and I just don't know about it. But you've got these rich ass kids. They've got money to burn, and they don't want to be these little 1 minute men when they get to college. So they play on that ego, and then bam, all of a sudden they've made thousands upon thousands of dollars. And this feels so much unlike a party in 16 Candles, for example, where it's so exaggerated and shit's coming through the ceiling, and all of a sudden there's soap in the vents, which I still don't understand how it got there, and just the entire house is wrecked. Here, everything is planned out. It's completely logical. They think of everything like rollaway beds, think about changing of the sheets, they think about rooms, they've got the idea of how they're going to move people in and out. It is brilliant, and I can guarantee, I know you think she's a bad person, but I think fucking Lana is going to make so much money, and Joel is going to make so much money because they are phenomenal business people.
Ash, this is further evidence of your assertion that they accurately wrote these kids' roles, because kids' perception of problems is so myopic that this rings true. Like, to any of us as adults, we understand that if I was to come home and I had a kid and they wrecked my Porsche, I would be upset. If I came home and my kid turned my home into a brothel, I'd be substantially more upset. So, like, fucking most of us now as adults would understand, cut your fucking losses. But to a kid, no, I can fix this is always the mantra, and you just keep pushing ahead.
Yeah, I don't know that turning it into a brothel is the worst thing that they could have done. He made $8,000 in a night.
Okay, you're telling me that if Emma took Vanessa's clothes and let prostitutes wear them while they were fucking people on your beds.
That's such a mean, that's a terrible term. Listen, if I wanted Emma to become a business tycoon and I put her into young entrepreneurs clubs, and she actually started a business that employed multiple single moms and multiple, let's just say, young people, provided a service in a safe way that also, in the end, the client was happy. You turned a profit. The workers turned a profit. You actually then incorporated some of the local businesses that rented beds. This is a win for everybody.
So, like, selling drugs would be okay too, because you're employing young people and the client.
Nobody was harmed. Nobody was harmed.
But are they not?
No, they're teaching a life lesson, like Jean said. They like it. They're learning. When they go to college, they're going to be
still illegal.
No.
I was about to say that I wasn't ever harmed by drugs, and then I remembered how smart I was before drugs.
No, but
kids don't do drugs.
But listen, Joel here, he is rebelling, and I don't feel bad. He can trash the house, let his parents get upset about the Porsche, whatever. Walk in on it. Doesn't matter. It's justified. His parents are the worst. They are officially the worst parents we've covered in Shat the Movies. They're unemotional. They're disconnected to their son. They treat him in a way that he is checking a box. House on the street. Okay, good job. Expensive car. He is one of those check boxes. I'm surprised we don't have a dog. There's not a moment that they have any kind of a real affectionate interaction with him. They view him as a possession. They care more about what he's going to do for the family. He is the single child. He's going to carry on the name. Oh, the Porsche. Oh, my egg. Oh, my stereo. When his dad says, what about the preponderance of bass? You should never touch my equalizer. It's clear that Joel has had a screwed up childhood and that his set of values is based upon what his parents have taught him. And for him to use this house as an opportunity to start a business and become successful, they should just deal with the consequences.
Other than the egg thing, I don't know if mom was so bad. I mean, she kept saying that like she trusted him to make the right decision, and she seemed to genuinely be, in tune in ways with Joel that dad wasn't. But the scene where his dad is finally proud of him, that's what got to me, because he's proud of him because of another man's evaluation of his own kid. Mm-hmm. And that evaluation was based on a single interview. And all it made me think was, I hope I'm never a parent who bases my child's worth on how others rate him. Like Joel's dad cares more about what Princeton thinks of him after one interview than about their 18 years together as people. And that's the part that really got to me.
I think that's a bit of a stretch. I mean, we've not seen their entire interaction. And I have to say, I had a dad who placed extreme importance on us getting into schools and us getting into particular schools. And I was certainly not unloved by him. It was this desire that if you're going to be successful, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And so this is going to give you the best opportunity for success. Because in his mind, he bought into the sale of the private university versus the public university. And I don't know. I think that it's really, really complicated because it will really matter to me where my kids go to college and what they decide to study. And not because I don't love them and I value their degree or what other people think of them, but because of the opportunities it affords them.
All I think about is when I got expelled from Chandler High School and my mom told the dean of students, well, your school isn't good enough for my son. My son who is running around naked with a machete at summer camp. Fuck your school.
Your mom is such an angel.
One part of the movie we haven't really talked about is this Chicago setting. And you guys know from Adventures in Babysitting to every other movie we've done, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I'm a sucker for Chicago. And in this movie, the L is featured both at the beginning and in a fairly critical sex scene. So I love the L. There's something magical about this experience. I don't know if you guys have ever had it, where you have a few drinks at home in your apartment, and then you go to the neighborhood bar that's just by the L station. You have a few more, and then you get in the train and you watch the city go by as you make your way to a nightclub, and everybody's out on the streets. And it's just like you're looking at your city. I mean, it is really your city. And since I moved to Arizona, I haven't had that experience. So I love the L. I love time on the L. I have an affinity for it. It is magical to me. But fucking on the L train, no thank you. There is one place that is the ultimate place to fuck. It's not at home. It's not at the park. It's not on the beach. It's not on the L train. That is a hotel. Hotel rooms, hands down, hottest place to fuck.
I was really grossed out by this. I mean, I don't think there's anything sexy at all about having sex on public transportation. I can't imagine the amount of germs that are there. And the way I feel about public sex today is the same way I feel about having sex and water. It looks hot and crazy like in Tequila Sunrise, but it's not for the most time. It's generally uncomfortable and awkward. And I feel like L train sex would be exactly the same.
Who the hell are you two guys? Gene, how much semen? Hold on.
I like how you stopped right there.
Gene, how much semen do you think is on the average chair or comforter in a hotel or floor? Or how many people do you think have sex on the counter in that bathroom? Or how many people have sex all over that room that is not cleaned?
Wait, do you think that this is a statement about the quantity of semen in the area?
I'm saying it's dirty. What's the issue? You've never had sex in a wild place like this. When I was at Disney, I remember a girlfriend and I at that point, we were going to wait until the monorail, it does a big loop around the lagoon. And in between the transportation center and by the time it gets around, you got a big stretch. So we thought, ooh, let's do this. started into it, didn't get too far, and then a voice came over the speakers and was like, hey, stop that. We didn't even think back in 98 that they'd have cameras, but come on, Ashley, please, you of all people, miss in the car with older people. You never were in like a dugout or somewhere like that.
My Fast Times at Ridgemont High moment. I mean, first of all, in the car with older people, what are you doing?
Please, the car seats of an average adolescent or 20-year-old is probably more filthy than the seat in the aisle.
Oh, yeah. I mean, car sex also I'm not a huge fan of. But, I mean, yeah. I mean, I definitely fooled around in the Haunted Mansion before. But, you know, I think you're talking about Disney World.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I've had sex in public, sure. But not on fucking public transportation. Ugh.
If you fuck the Haunted Mansion, does that count as a three-way?
Oh, you're so terrible. That's terrible. That's a bad joke.
I thought it was pretty funny.
I got a blowjob in Injun Joe's cave on Huck Finn's Island. That I did.
In whose cave?
Injun Joe, I think it was called. It was like Huck Finn's Island.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I think that's
yeah.
a way to make it racist and pornographic.
Yeah. Hand jobs on Splash Mountain, and also you got Spaceship Earth. I mean, Disney World's got lots of places to
It
fuck,
does,
right?
exactly. So you guys should be worried about those seats and not the L.
Yeah, but it's different, though, because I can control it. It's different on public transport.
No, but
why did they call it Splash Mountain?
oh, you're less drinking for Gene.
I think more drinking for Gene.
Big D, you misunderstand. I'm not talking about cleanliness, my friend. I'm talking about I am an adult who recognizes certain things about a hotel room. Let me tell you.
A hotel room's great. I understand.
When I'm in a hotel room, there's nobody on a speaker going, Gene Lyons.
Stop it.
2 is leverage. Hotel rooms have everything at the perfect height for like good sex leverage. But the main thing is that you're freed from all responsibilities. When you're in a hotel room, you don't have a care in the fucking world. And that's what makes that sex super. And also feels like you're a traveler and they're a stranger.
And you don't have to do the sheets. You don't have to wash. That's a nice thing. But this scene on the train really made me, it hit home how much the music is a big part of this movie. You know, I think the score, it's sophisticated. It's not a typical teen sex movie where we would have stuff that was popular at the time. It is a lot of instrumental that strings the scenes together. But then there's also a couple of iconic songs that are used in memorable ways that are legendary. You have the old time rock and roll in his underwear. You see him slide across the floor. It's been parodied. It's memes. Everyone knows what it is. Muddy Water, Mannish Boy. When you get the endless parade of sex workers coming in and Barry keeps opening and closing the door. Then the train scene starts with Phil Collins in The Air Tonight. And it builds and it builds and it builds. The music is as much a key component as Chicago, as everything. It weaves and holds the story together.
I might be in the minority here, but I feel like if you're going to play Phil Collins in The Air Tonight, someone needs to die, though.
No, I don't.
That's a killing song.
I mean, that homeless guy may have died that they got off the train.
When they pushed him onto the track, onto the third rail, I don't know what happened.
I mean, he covered him up real nicely with his shirt so that he died warm.
When Joel tries to call Lana, Guido answers and tells Joel that he will let Joel buy back his furniture. Joel and his friends manage to get everything moved back in just as his parents walk in, though his mother notices a crack in her egg. Later, Joel's father congratulates him and lets him know the interviewer was very impressed and that Joel will be accepted into Princeton. Joel meets Lana at a restaurant and they speculate about their future. So one thing I was worried about with this movie was that at some point, these two, Joel and Lana, would develop some sort of a romance that made no sense at all. I like that Lana never clearly becomes Joel's girl. Like, we're never quite sure if this whole thing is a long con. I mean, Big D, you said it before. When he says, "Are you my girlfriend?" Yes, no, maybe. And she responds, yes, no, maybe. And then starts kissing him. We never know if she breaks away from Guido. Like, were they in cahoots the whole time? Is this just his way of pulling money out of Joel through Lana? I mean, he's at her apartment. She doesn't seem to be pissed about it. And that's my number one complaint with movies built around a sex worker character, is that typically they're going to let go of their life that they had for whatever fucking reason and suddenly just go along with this person because they have money and live the virtuous life, quote unquote.
And I was also really worried it was going to be some happily ever after. The thing that I got really afraid is that we were going to have a flash forward and Joel was going to be walking around in his Letterman jacket in the fall on Princeton's campus and going to meet Lana, who's enrolled at the local community college in business classes so she can turn her life around and they'll live together happily ever after. And like Eugene, I'm really just glad that she stayed who she was. And I think the movie is a lot better for it. And again, thinking about the time frame and thinking about the type of movie that this is, I mean, that's pretty revolutionary for a film like this.
Yeah, David, this is a very smart commission because, as Ash said, Risky Business is such a different kind of movie. Like Adventures in Babysitting, it thrusts suburban kids into Chicago where they were terrified of the world around them. But Risky Business is something very different where it brings Chicago into the suburbs. And a part of the movie we haven't really talked about, it's not really expressly said, but you can see it through the events that transpire, is that nothing can hurt the rich. Like it's almost Gatsby-esque when you dig a little bit, right? Lana and her crew are ripping Joel off, and he and his friends can know that's happening. They can make every mistake in the world. They could play all these situations wrong, but in the end, they can just shrug it off and still get into Princeton.
Oh, they definitely can. And you ask about whether or not this was a long con. And I like the fact that it's left opened. I think it was, and I think Joel knows it when he says, was this a setup from the beginning? Joel started out naive. Lana, she became her Padawan. She raised him up. She taught him the business. They're now on an equal footing when they're walking away, right? She's, oh, well, do you have any money? Oh, I got some bonds. Oh, write you a check. The roles have reversed, and I like that. But they're talking about in 10 years, where are we going to be? Joel, I don't know if he goes to Princeton. He's definitely not Princeton material. Okay. I thought he was going to be a borderline case, maybe, he would have made it. But then when we're going through and we're hearing all of his accolades, okay, he's the secretary of the Spanish club. He, 1 year of junior varsity tennis, 1 year of varsity track, honorable mention at the Cooks County Science Fair. He was on the student council 2 years, yearbook staff. He had a 3.14 GPA. He's the 52nd ranked student in his class. He's in the 84th percentile. He didn't even get a 1200 on his SATs. If he goes to Princeton, I don't think he is going to make it. I think he's going to fail out or maybe start up some kind of business and start running a brothel. What do you guys think happens to him?
One thing I learned from being an RA at Arizona State is that people's performance in high school was very rarely an indicator of how they were going to perform in college. I had lots of kids who were freshmen coming into my residence hall, who were ultra performers in high school, top of their class, and absolutely wiped out in college because they couldn't handle the difference, right? There's a psychological gut punch that occurs when you go from being the smartest person in your school to just middling in college. And a lot of kids can't handle that. In fact, I'd say maybe the kids who are used to being sort of average are more prepared to handle that blow when they get into, secondary education.
I think that is absolutely true. I had so many friends that went with me to the school, to Tulane University. And my brother had so many at Columbia that just couldn't hack the workload. It wasn't that they weren't smart enough. It wasn't that. It was the upper level requirements of reading and writing and the amount of reading and writing that were being done. But I think that a kid like Joel is going to make it just fine. And here's the deal. Like today, you have to have an average to get into Princeton. You have to have an average score somewhere between a 680 to 710 on each. But that was not the case back in the 80s. So you could score in the high 500s and the low 600s and still have a shot depending on a lot of other things, especially if you were a legacy, right? And that really mattered a lot. So I don't know. I think that Joel's going to be rich just like his daddy. And he's going to be just fine.
There's that famous scene with a really weird edit. Joel kind of flunks out of that interview and he's got the sunglasses on and he just goes, looks like it's the University of Illinois, and then shakes his head for a little bit too long. And I had that moment. Like I was supposed to go to George Washington University and it didn't work out. I didn't get that scholarship. And so there's no way I could have afforded George Washington otherwise. And so I looked at Arizona State, and being, in the top 5% of the graduating class in Arizona at the time, this was in the 90s, that qualified you for like tuition-free education at a state university. So I was like, fuck, why not? Right. And so I took it. But I got to tell you, it's liberating to know that you're going from a place that turns you down or that you couldn't afford to a place that really wants you and is willing to basically pay you to be there. But it did leave me with regrets. Anytime I watch a movie where there's this Institute of Higher Education or meet a person in my professional life who attained a degree that was more impressive than mine, and I know I'm more intelligent than they are, I got to say it bothers me. So I don't know how you guys feel about that whole situation.
Well, I think Lana taught him that you can't beat the education you learn on your streets. You can't learn it from a textbook how to run a business. Selling paper towel holders and making $800. He made $9,000 in a night. Ooh, what a life, or something like that. But Joel's going to be just fine. Lana, she's either going to be Heidi Fleiss or she'll be dead in 5 years. One of the two.
On that note, so there's your person that dies, Gene. It's Lana 10 years from now when she joins the cast of Kids.
Now is the time we give our wipe scores for Risky Business. The Shat scores are our way of telling you how many wipes this movie would take to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect score. It is driving around 1983 Chicago in a Porsche 928. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster of a movie. It is Tom Cruise's slow motion O face while he's getting it cowgirl on the L train. Ash, we'll start with you. What is your score for Risky Business?
I really enjoyed this movie. I'm really surprised by how much, but this was one of those surprises that we get with commissions where it's like, wow, like I'm really glad I've now seen this film and know what it actually is about, because the movie's funny. It's really well paced. I think that it shows a lot of evidence for why Tom Cruise became this massive star that he eventually became, because he is so incredibly charismatic in this film. I know I gave him a hard time in Interview with the Vampire because I still argue that with that blonde wig, he just looks ridiculous. But as himself, he has so much charisma, so much charm about him. And because of that and all of the secondary characters in this movie, it was absolutely engaging. And it felt really short to me. I would have been fine with it being longer than it was. I would absolutely watch it again. And for me, it's 1.5 wipes.
Ash, I'm going to come in just a little bit lower than you on the score. I'm sure this comparison's been made before, but I enjoyed this movie in the way that I enjoyed The Graduate. Risky Business got off to a bumpy start, but it really found its footing once Joey Pants and Bronson Pinchot showed up. Tom Cruise, as you said, Ash, undeniably charismatic despite the worst wardrobe I have seen in 80s cinema. And there is, believe it or not, a subtle nihilism going on in the undercurrent of this movie that I really dig. The 80s pace of life held me in a trance. There was a point when he's talking to Jackie, and it's just like, I'll be over tonight. Like, just tonight. That's how the 80s worked. I'll stop by, tonight. And some of the dialogue carried serious weight. I think particularly lines delivered from Miles and from Joel alike. So for me, this is still better than average, but slightly lower than your score, Ash, with 2 wipes.
This innocent young version of Tom Cruise might be my favorite. I still enjoy the cocky Maverick, the Top Gun, but there's something about this performance that surprised me. It was enjoyable. And I think he succeeds where Matthew Broderick failed at Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ferris is unlikable. He is a rich, spoiled kid who gets his way at everything. And then at the end, he smiles at the camera. What are you still doing here? Here's the fact that Joel is a likable, down-to-earth, naive kid. He's kind of real. And that's why the movie succeeds. I think Risky Business, it's sexy, it's smart, it's fun. It's not so much a Porky's horny boy sex fantasy. It's more a stylish social satire about a teenager's coming of age. And I think it's got so many great, well-pointed commentaries about the culture of money in the 80s and what it is to succeed. It is much more than people give it credit for, and I think it is a 1.25 wipe movie.
All right, with 1.25 wipes coming from Big D, 1.5 wipes from Ash, and the anchor of 2 wipes coming from me, that gives Risky Business an average wipe score of 1.583 repeating wipes.
So, Gene, with a score of 1.583 repeating wipes, that now ties this movie in the 80 spot with Clue, and Leon the Professional. Slightly better than Gremlins, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and slightly worse than Magnolia, Scarface, and Galaxy Quest.
We're building a little Tom Cruise block for Ash there. I like it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't even realize that.
Me too.
The Ashley Commission of Magnolia. Good times.
I know. Feels like another lifetime ago. So long ago.
Yet another Tom Cruise era. Wheels within wheels.
Yes.
Well, thanks, David, for this commission. Big D, we're going to dust something off the shelves that we haven't done in quite a time. And that is a classic Shat the Movies, Actually.
Yes, this is a good actually. It was on Twitter where one of our listeners, Raymond Dahlman, wrote, "Hey, Big D, Herm Edwards said the famous line, 'We play to win the game.'" You are very correct. I was thinking of Jim Mora's playoffs. We're talking about playoffs. So you're correct. It was Herm Edwards. I was very wrong, and thank you for catching.
You mean Herm Edwards, the brilliant head coach of Sun Devils football?
Yes, he was the Jets coach back then.
He's a great man.
So thank you very much for keeping us in line. And Gene, that takes us to next week's movie. When a beautiful first grade teacher arrives at a prep school, she soon attracts the attention of an ambitious teenager named Max, who quickly falls in love with her. Max turns to the father of two of the schoolmates for advice on how to woo the teacher. However, a situation soon gets complicated when Max's new friend becomes involved with her, setting the two pals against each other in a war for her attention. Commissioned by Paul D., released in 1998, and it's a Wes Anderson film.
I am so excited. I love this movie so much. This and Life Aquatic are two of my favorite movies. I'm so fucking excited. I'm geeking out.
Really? Really?
Oh my God. I love Wes Anderson so much. This one is so good.
Okay, we'll see.
I'm so excited.
Well, thank you, David, for your commission. Thank you, Paul, for commissioning our next film. And thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, completing a free anonymous survey to help attract advertisers, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all that information by visiting our website, shatthemovies.com. Do not buy the Gene is a Monster t-shirts. Big D is a monster.
No.
Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. You can find all that information on our website, shatontv.com, where everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D and Ash, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for this amazing Wes Anderson movie.
These are the names that define our world. The artists who shaped our minds. The rebels who challenged our views. But of all these legends, there is one that stands above all others.
I'm sorry, did someone say my name?
What's the secret, Max?
The secret? I think you just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life. For me, it's going to Rushmore.
Sharp little guy. He's one of the worst students we've got. We're putting you on what we call sudden death academic probation.
Could I see some documentation on that, please?
Did you invite that kid to your party?
Max Fisher. Come on, Dad, there's gonna be girls there. I'd rather die. Pull your head out of your... Maybe I'm spending too much of my time starting up clubs and putting on plays. It's time, homie.
Kiss me, little one.
I should probably be trying harder to score chicks.
I like your hat.
You're a teacher here, aren't you? Oh, I'm so glad you could come.
I want you to meet a friend of mine, Peter Flynn, Max Fisher.
Hi. Who's this guy?
Has it ever crossed your mind that you're far too young for me?
I like your nurse's uniform, guy.
These are OR scrubs.
Oh, are they?
I don't know what you see in her. I don't think she's right for you.
What's that supposed to be?
Hello, Herman.
How are you, Rosemary?
I know about you and the teacher.
Does Max know? 5'3", 112 pounds, glasses.
You know, you and Hammond deserve each other. You're both little children.
War does funny things to men. But you'll find a pair of safety glasses and some earplugs underneath your seats. Please feel free to use them.
What do you think of Max's latest opus?
It's good, but let's hope it's got a happy ending. Rushmore.
Thank you very much.
Tons of evidence as to why Dom DeLuise. Y'all, I'm drunk.
Yeah,
I
same.
am so sorry.
I wish.
No, you're fine.
I am like really like girl wasted. Okay.